The Jazz did it. After a tough season, the Jazz secured the best lottery odds. But what exactly does that get the Utah Jazz? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name is Leif Thulin, and I'm excited and honored to have the opportunity to fill in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz once again. As many of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who's a credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant for the past 4 seasons, and statistician. And wow, that's been a long time, and I loved every second of it. And lover of college basketball, so don't expect all the geeky numbers of usual that you're accustomed to be gone, but I'll bring a unique perspective as a diehard college hoops fan, NBA draft analyst, and a Jazz employee, as well as diehard fan, to make you as knowledgeable as possible about your beloved Utah Jazz. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is comment anything below. And today's question is, do you think the Jazz would have been better off winning against Minnesota to try to get a second lottery pick if everything went our way in terms of tiebreakers and play-ins? Or do you think that guaranteed being in the top 5 is the better way to go? A lot of game theory nerds have been arguing about it on Twitter, and I want to hear your opinion. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Sounds like a great deal to me, so sign up. And by the way, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing Locked On Jazz daily newsletter, a one-stop ultimate team and league coverage delivered right into your inbox. So sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Jazz newsletter. Today in the first segment, I'll explain where the Jazz could be drafting for all of our picks and how it's possible. And in the second segment, I'll tell you why locking up the top spot in draft odds means so much with some math and history to back it. And in the final segment, I'll go through some positive trends to finish the season that I think hold water and matter going into the next season after what was a difficult season. So let's dive right in. The Jazz finished the regular season with 17 wins. For those of you who followed the advice of the under previews, where I previewed the season month by month, I want to say in August or September. So congrats to you guys, because the Jazz easily went under. But more importantly, the Jazz have guaranteed themselves a top 5 pick, and that's what you wanted to do in the 2025 draft. And let me remind you guys, in the 2023 draft, it was about Wembanyama, and there's a big fall off. 2024, no one really liked it. Everyone said, oh, you need to be in the contention to get a good pick in 2025. That's what the Jazz were adhering to, getting the 9th and 10th pick in those 2 years and believing it was time to do so this year. And they've done it. So mission accomplished. The Jazz earned a top 5 pick and it's a guaranteed top 5 pick by losing the game against the Timberwolves, which is a must win for Minnesota. But the bigger story is earlier in the day, Bub Carrington of the Wizards hit a circus shot floater where he went left, drove left, contorted his body, threw it up with his right hand, tremendously high arc, and it nestled in off the glass ever so softly, earning the Wizards their 18th win, ensuring the Jazz have a top 5 pick locked up, because when you're the number 1 spot, you can only fall 4 spots down. And so the Jazz will be picking 1st through 5th. The rest of the games mattered too, as the Jazz had the Timberwolves pick, so there wasn't necessarily a certainty that the Jazz would then try to lose, because in theory, the Jazz could have a coin flip, meaning a 50-50 chance for best odds if the Jazz were to win, have 18 wins as well as the Wizards. And if the Jazz had won and then won the coin flip, they'd have 1st through 5th, as well as a chance for the Wolves to lose in the play-in and have some tiebreakers go their way. And the Jazz could, in theory, have 2 lottery picks. It's a risky proposition, but that's what the game theory would be in supporting the opposite side of what happened. That didn't happen, but there's the theory. The Wolves beat the Jazz, and by virtue of doing so, found themselves locking horns with the Lakers in the 6. They're the 6 seed, the Lakers being the 3 in the first round. And the Warriors lost at home to the Clippers, so that moved the Warriors into the play-in, and the Wolves were the only team with 49 wins in the Wild Wild West. So in sum, that gives the Jazz the picks 1 through 5, whatever it turns out to be, 21 from the Timberwolves and 51 from the Timberwolves. And you may remember the Jazz have a second round pick, and that's courtesy of the Mavericks. The Mavericks It right now lies at 43, but there is some possibility it moves as the Mavericks play the Kings in the play-in. So we have 4 picks. That's there. We're going to go through that, and we'll talk about those second-round picks and, of course, those first-round picks in future episodes. But let's dig into the math of May 12th, which, if you don't know, is a massive day in Jazz history. May 12th is the lottery. And how it works is the Jazz and 2 other teams who finished top 3, meaning the Wizards and the Hornets, all have a 52% chance of landing within the top 4. The Jazz, however, have a 48% chance of landing outside of the top 4, but only at one spot, and that's all at the 5th pick. They have a 48% chance at landing at 5. But the Jazz can only land at 5, as opposed to the Wizards and the Hornets can land at 6 and 7. So the Hornets can land at anywhere between 1 and 7 because they're the 3rd. As for the Wizards, they can land anywhere between 1st and 6th because they're 2nd. You can only fall 4 spots. But they have a 52% chance, just like the Utah Jazz, to land within the top 4. So let's go through the Jazz and their possible mathematical outcomes. The Jazz have a 14% chance of landing the top pick. Presumably, that would be Cooper Flagg. And wow, that be awesome. And I'd be curious to know, and you guys can comment this below, how high on the hierarchy of individualized moments. So, for those of you who are old enough, I wasn't, but when John Stockton hit the shot against the Rockets in 1997, that would be pretty high. For me, Darren Williams hitting a game winner against OKC was an awesome moment. Or when the Jazz were able to beat the Clippers in Game 7 on the road in 2017. Those were some great moments for me. So how high on an individualized moment scale of being a Jazz fan would landing Cooper Flagg be? And please respond on that, comments on that with the top pick. So let's go through this, though. Cooper Flagg is not just hype, and he's got real substance to him. He's the real deal. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about that, and I'll brainstorm as well, and we'll break down Cooper Flagg's game extensively soon. But the Jazz have a 13.4% chance of picking second. That would be likely Dylan Harper. 14% chance at 1, 13.4 at 2, 12.7 at 3, and a 12% chance at picking 4, and that leaves a 47.9% chance of picking 5th. So not quite 48 for those of you who are sticklers. That lands the Jazz a likely average about 3.7. For perspective, the Wizards have identical odds to pick 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, but then a 28% chance of picking 5th and a 20% chance of selecting 6th. That adds to a 3.9 being their average, meaning they're most likely to pick 4th, much like the Jazz are if you're being rounding up, but the Jazz do have a higher average, or a lower average, meaning a higher chance of picking closer to the top. The Wizards, like I said, have that. The Hornets are at 4.1 and the Pelicans are at 4.4. So very gradual scale of difference between picks 1 through or odds 1 through 4. The Jazz being 1, the Pelicans being 4. You may say if all of those are rounded, they all equal the 4th pick, and you'd be correct if you're rounding properly. But I'll take any advantage given. And though the odds used to be at 25% for the worst team to land the best pick, the Jazz managed the season well. You had to put yourself in perspective, in a position, and have perspective of, look, you can't change the rules, so put yourself in position for the best outcome. The Jazz saw what the youngsters could do and what they have going forward while not losing sight of what mattered the most this season, finding the future and prioritizing accordingly. Previous seasons, the Jazz lacked a clear-cut, defined, hey, this is what we're going to do this season, as they started 10-3. They started very well in 2023 when Victor Wembanyama was there. I've complained about that bitterly numerous times. The next season, the Jazz were 26-26 through 52 games and went 5-25 in the next 30 games. So it wasn't clear. The Jazz landed picks 9 and 10, and in those players in recent drafts, including our own guys, have unclear futures. That's what we're going to talk about next. How often those top 5 picks yield all-star or better results, and why it truly matters that the Jazz executed the plan to have a great chance to land Cooper Flagg or other future stars in the NBA. All of that and coming up next on Locked On Jazz. Basketball and hockey playoffs are heating up, and there's no better way to turn your sports knowledge into real rewards than with Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play fantasy daily. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on at least 2 player projections and you're in. You can even combine players across sports, basketball, hockey, baseball, and more for your chance to win up to 2,000 times your cash. So that's $10. Imagine what you're getting back right there. So here's what I'd take a gander at picking this week. If you're into basketball, like you must be if you're listening to this show, Luka to score more than 28 points. He's one of the playoff scoring highest ever. When he plays in the playoffs, he puts up performances. And then Jason Tatum, more on the rebounds. Take a gander at those and win some big time money. Or if you're more of a hockey fan, Connor McDavid for more than 1 goal and Austin Matthews for more than 5 shots on goal are 2 excellent ideas with excellent value. What I love about it is how easy it is to set up your lineup in under 60 seconds. Prize Picks even runs cool promos like Taco Tuesday, where they discount player projections up to 25% for even more value, and payouts are fast, safe, and secure. That's the best part. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Spring is here, and that means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement. From small updates like stylish cabinet hardware to major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, or outdoor lighting, Wayfair has quality products for every budget. I just upgraded my kitchen, and people are coming in tomorrow to renovate that with Wayfair. And the selection was incredible. Their free and fast shipping made it easy, so no hauling heavy items from the store. I love that they have top brands like GE and Moen at great prices. Shopping was seamless, and I found exactly what I needed to fit my space and my style. Wayfair makes home improvement easy. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's Wayfair, WAYFAR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All righty, welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin, and I'm excited to be back with you guys talking about my favorite team, the Utah Jazz. So thank you to all the everydayers that make the Jazz fan base so special. We had such great fans this season, despite being the worst team in the NBA. We can officially say that now as the Jazz finished 17-65, but the fan support never wavered. So speaking of special players make special teams, and winning teams typically have top 5 picks on their team. So the Jazz will have one of those top 5 picks. And having a top 5 pick in today's NBA is a very good start. But let's get into those geeky numbers that we talked about at the outset and figure out how likely it is that we snag an all-star at those picks, comparing it to previous years. And I'll fully admit, scouting has become better the past 10, 15, 20 years. But I've got some data that goes back 35 years. And then I'll bring you the most recent data, and the outcome's pretty much the same. So here's a set of data from 1989 to 2019, a 30-year data plot, and we'll verify and strengthen what the data says with household names running the NBA now as a follow-up from the past 5 years that are not included in this data. Also, as a happy coincidence, 2019 is when the lottery odds change so that the bottom 3 teams can share equal 14% odds rather than the worst team possessing a 25% chance. Well, typically I'm on board with that, but this year I would have loved to have a 25% chance to land Cooper Flagg. So let's investigate how often those worst teams land the top pick and how often the top 5 picks become stars, and we'll do that simultaneously as a happy coincidence. So in the 30-year case study, and the everydayers may remember this, I referenced this a couple months ago, there's a 63.33% chance of number 1 picks becoming all-stars. 40% chance of number 2 picks becoming all-stars, 57% chance of number 3 picks becoming all-stars, 33% chance of 4th picks becoming all-stars, 30% chance of 5th picks becoming all-stars. That's according to the data from 1989 to 2019. Picks 6 and 7, however, yield 20 and 10% respectively, becoming all-stars. So staying within the top 5 does seem to have more value than many saying, oh, what's the difference between 5 and 6? So had we gone after beating the Timberwolves and lost the coin flip with the Wizards. And then 7 is even less favorable. So at least historically, getting in that number 1 spot so you can only fall as low as 5 does matter. Now, admittedly, I'll fully tell you that I don't think an all-star is necessarily the barometer for what can transform a franchise. For instance, I've been on record here telling you that Lauri Markkanen I don't think can be the guy, and I'm not all that confident he can even be the number 2 on a championship team. That's just how good teams in the NBA are and how well constructed they are. However, it doesn't hurt to be an all-star if you're picking number 1. But a lot of these guys at number 1, number 2 are better than that. So let's go to the teams that do have the transcendent stars and how did they get them? So now back to the recent years where the odds shift to making it harder to land the top pick for the worst team. And here are the worst teams and what pick they drafted at. In 2020, the worst record belonged to the Warriors, who drafted 2nd. The team that landed first was Minnesota, who was 3rd in the odds. In 2021, the worst record belonged to the Rockets, who drafted 2nd. The Pistons drafted 1, and they were 2nd in the odds. In 2022, the worst record belonged to the Rockets, who drafted 3rd. The Magic won the lottery as the 2nd worst team. In 2023, the worst record belonged to the Pistons, who drafted 5th. And the Spurs won it as tied for the 2nd worst team, and I believe they have the 3rd best odds per a coin flip. In 2024, the worst record belonged to the Pistons, who drafted 5th, so got unlucky twice in a row, and the Hawks won it from 10th, the 10th best odds. So even though the Pistons seemed unlucky in this study, and there was no number 1 that picked number 1, and odds may turn to us then. Maybe it's regression to the mean. But the Pistons seemed unlucky because they missed out on the top pick twice, even though they had the worst record. They got it once, and they're in the playoffs with an all-NBA guy in Cade Cunningham. The Rockets missed a top pick a few times there as well, and now we're in 2nd in the West with a couple very good lottery picks in their own. The Cavs had a top pick there with Evan Mobley. They had the number 2 pick, turned into an all-star. They're number 1 in the East. The Magic landed the number 1 pick, who's an all-star. He missed some time this year, but could have been an all-NBA guy. And last year in his 2nd season, they were the number 5 team in the East. The Spurs got Wembanyama, so enough said right there. So getting top picks really does matter. But let's see how those top 5 picks and the success rate and how the 30 years prior and what the data says about how frequently those all-stars turn into being those big-time players. Let's test it with these 5 years. I'm going to go picks 1 through 5 and tell you, have they been all-stars or will they be all-stars? And we'll see if the projections end up being right. But I will tell you who has been an all-star already. So let's go off the top ahead. The last 5 years, the number 1 picks, if I remember correctly. And if I'm wrong, make sure to tell me in the comments, but I don't think I will be. It's been Ant, Cade, Paolo, Wemby, and Reshape. So 4 of those guys have been all-stars already. And 4 of the 5 have been all-NBA already. And I'm counting Wemby as all-NBA this year, even though he didn't finish the season, because he's that good. He would have been 1st or 2nd team. And Cade Cunningham has not yet been named all-NBA, but he will be. So the Reshape part of this is he's a rookie. I don't expect an all-star or an all-NBA team as a rookie, but he's going to be 2nd in the Rookie of the Year voting. So that's a great hit rate. That's 4 all-NBA guys in the past 5 years. I'm talking about scouting getting better. That's 80% and potentially 100% if Reshape continues to develop. So far that study looks pretty good, which was 63%. Now the 2nd picks, if I remember correctly, James Wiseman, Jalen Green, Chet Holmgren, Brandon Miller, Alex Sarr. The only player I truly feel is a perennial all-star of that bunch is Chet, but Jalen Green, Brandon Miller, and Alex Sarr all have a chance to become all-stars. That's 1 of 5. And there's the gap between the 2. I do think that's a bit anomalous, but hey, we'll stick with the data. Now, the 3rd pick, strangely, 3 yielded better results than 2. 56% of 3 third picks have been all-stars, whereas only 40% of 2nd picks. That's just a strange hiccup there. I'd still rather have the 2nd pick this year than 3rd, but it's just showing you the descending from 63% down. So it's been LaMelo Ball, Evan Mobley, Jabari Smith, Scoot Henderson, Reed Shepherd. There have been 2 all-stars in Ball and Mobley, and there are 2 who are big-time talents and 3 solid players. I think Jabari Smith will never be an all-star. I think Scoot has a chance. I'd be a little surprised if Reed does, but you have 2 all-stars and guys that are, I don't know if I'd say franchise talents in Ball and Mobley, but I wouldn't be surprised. Both are very, very good. Now you go to the 4th pick. Patrick Williams, Scotty Barnes, let's see, Keegan Murray, Amen Thompson, and Stephon Castle. Barnes has been an all-star. He was the Rookie of the Year. Castle and Thompson, I believe, will both be all-stars, and I think there's a chance that Amen Thompson is so special he can be an all-pro at some point. So let's call that 3 of 5 in time, and that's pretty darn good. Now you go to the 5th pick, and here's a drop-off because if I remember correctly, it's Isaac Okoro, Jalen Suggs, Jaden Ivey, Osar Thompson, and Ron Holland. So there's no all-stars between that quintet right there, but I do think Osar Thompson's very good. Now, that's where it gets scary because the Jazz have a 48% chance of landing 5. But you can see that in my example here, you can see the descending certainty that these picks will yield a franchise changer. But it's evident when looking at future All-Stars and those who have become All-Stars that making sure that the Jazz were within the top 5 was absolutely vital. Absolutely, positively vital. And now the odds maybe, hopefully, can favor us. And as they say in Hunger Games, may the odds be ever in your favor. May the odds be ever in our favor in this case. So hopefully the 1,000 ping pong balls, and yes, that's correct, 1,000 ping pong balls with 140 of them with the Jazz's combination pop up out of the thin air that's popped out of the ping pong machine and say Utah Jazz, and we can draft Cooper Flagg, because that would be one of the most historic moments in franchise history. So coming up next, we're going to talk about what did bounce in our favor, like we hope the ping pong balls do on the hardwood this past season in a year full of frustration. What is there to be excited about coming up in the future that is not draft related? And that's coming up next. Right now, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has it all and has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out and head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. I also want to tell you guys about my friends and that's Murdoch. Murdoch Chevy, the family is unbelievable. So telling you some history, they've been in Utah for over 80 years. And when I think of Chevy, I think of a truck going down the dirt road in a cloud of dust, but I also think of consistency, the model of consistency. That's what Chevy is. They're located in both Woods Cross and in Logan, and there's a great lineup of Chevy trucks, the Colorado, the Silverado, that, like I said, that's synonymous when you think of Chevy. But there's also an amazing lineup of SUVs with the Tahoe, the Suburban, the Blazer, the Equinox, and the Trax. So not only just those trucks that I instantaneously think Chevy and I think of, but they also have fantastic SUVs. And you can go to the website to see all the latest deals and what's in the inventory live. They do a great job keeping that up to date. And all the people at Murdoch Chevy are fantastic and will take care of you, especially when you tell them that you're Locked On Jazz listeners. So make sure to go trek up to Woods Cross or Logan and get yourself a Murdoch Chevy. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin. And if you're like me, you watch this past season each night looking for silver linings. You try to think positively in a dark season where I almost felt weird about having a satisfaction with a close loss. Whereas before it would be gut-wrenching and frustrate me to no end. And when I was a little kid, I couldn't sleep when the Jazz would lose a close game. I felt like they should have won. Now it made me feel better and sleep better if the Jazz would lose those games because of knowing how important the lottery odds were. And then a win would be, okay, great, we won, but what does it mean going forward? And knowing how badly the Jazz needed Cooper Flagg tainted my mind and what this perspective of the season was. But I always still in the back of my mind had a point of, hey, I really want to see these guys improve at this thing. So I'm going to tell you about a few of those things that stood out to me and I think hold water as not just, oh, someone had to do well on a bad team. Like there's going to be some pessimists out there that say, oh, of course someone had to do something. Like we score 111 points a game, so someone's got to score. But that's not how I view it. At many terms, you're going to become frustrated because the season went poorly, but there are always silver linings. And the most prominent in there to me was Walker Kessler. He had a bounce back season from what I thought was a rough sophomore season after a sensational rookie year. Kessler stats won't show you the growth much like they did. They didn't do a full justice of reflecting how his slump, or if you want to put it in less taboo terms, stagnation or a plateau, and the lack of confidence that he displayed that you could see through the screen, or in my case, watch each day at the arena. He seemed uncertain of himself that year, and the statistics didn't say too much of a difference happened. But this year, some statistics do tell you there was a big leap. But I will tell you, confidence-wise, you could see it was palpable, it was tangible. His presence in the locker room, talking with him, interviewing him, you could feel Walker Kessler felt like he belonged, and it mattered. So here's some stats that tell you how good Kessler was, even though I told you stats didn't reflect how much of a difference there was between year 2 and 3. So according to my notes, Kessler led the NBA, excluding Wembanyama, who did not qualify for the lead in blocks per game because he did not play enough games. But Kessler averaged 2.4 blocks per game and led the NBA. That's great. Kessler also led the NBA on a completely different side of the basketball with equal analytical importance, with 16.7% offensive rebound percentage, which is crucial in today's analytically driven model of rebounding your own team's misses, mattering more to team defense than getting back on defense. Traditionally, all the guards, you'd only send a couple people to the glass. Well, the Jazz could go and grab rebounds on the glass, and at times against the Rockets, Walker Kessler dominated. He had 8 offensive boards himself against the Houston Rockets, who led the NBA in offensive rebounding. He had games like that where he was the best big on the floor, including an all-star like Alper and Şengün. And that's a great way to help the defense get back, but also score points by offensive rebounding. So more tangibly, as opposed to numbers driven, in my opinion, Walker Kessler played hard, established himself as a player with winning traits despite being on a losing team, and winning habits despite being on a team that was not accustomed to winning. He ran the floor, protected the rim, got extra possessions, and solidified his spot as a key piece to the Jazz's build to prominence and contention. I think there were some people that thought Walker Kessler could be an all-star after year 1. I think there were some people that believed Walker Kessler shouldn't be in the Jazz's future plans after year 2. And I'm here to tell you that I don't know if either of those things are true. It's probably somewhere in the middle, but it's definitely closer to Walker Kessler being a very high-level big. Even if it's not an all-star, it's more likely that he's not an all-star because the West has such good bigs that are going to perennial all-stars and prevent him from becoming one. But his level has nothing to say that he can't put up all-star level production in what we've become accustomed to as being a big that warrants all-star consideration. So I'm high on Walker Kessler. I really was impressed. I talked to Gordy Chiesa many times about what do you look for in a season where it looks bleak, you're losing a ton of games, and the lineups change, the rookies get a lot of play. Lauri Markkanen's missing time. John Collins is missing time. What do you look for? And he routinely said winning traits. And Walker Kessler seemed to be the one who embodied playing winning basketball despite losing many games. Secondly, Isaiah Collier has a ton to improve shooting the basketball, but he did improve vastly. But what I want to talk about is he shared the ball, and he made his teammates better in a season where there's a lot of, oh, go get your own. These are empty calorie things. A lot of people talk about that as a narrative in the NBA. He shared the sugar, and he did so much. He passed the great John Stockton, as you all know, in terms of assists as a rookie. That said, John Stockton played fewer minutes and played behind Ricky Green, but still an incredible accomplishment all the same. You may all know that, but did you know he had over 100 assists in January, joining the likes of Trae Young, Ja Morant, and LaMelo Ball as the only rookies ever to eclipse 100 assists in a calendar month? That's pretty darn good. That's elite company to be in a conversation with. He's not those same guys, just like we talked about Walker Kessler not being an all-NBA talent as a center because he had a good season. But it is very important to recognize how good of a ball handler and facilitator Isaiah Collier is. On the court, Collier led the Jazz to playing more quickly and assertively, and he, to me, opened up Keyonte George. That actually was a very noticeable thing, especially around January or February when they played together, and they used each other very well, forming a symbiotic relationship and a very promising youthful backcourt duo as Keyonte George felt comfortable with the ball, not in his hands, but thrived because of Isaiah Collier's pace and ability to push the ball. Keyonte George was a very good transition three-point shooter and shot the ball well off the catch with Collier, putting pressure on the rim, touches the paint at an elite level, And this is one thing you guys may not have the ability to see on a TV, and it's hard to even see if you go to even a lot of games. But watching him shoot day in and day out, watching him shoot during warmups, watching him shoot during the game, the cadence in which he releases the ball, the confidence that he feels. I noticed his shot improve, and the ball spins less like an orbit of a globe. When you think of a globe when you're in school and you push it and it spins kind of laterally, but also over the top, that's what Isaiah Collier's ball did at the start of the season. And by the end of the season, there was more traditional backspin. And maybe even more importantly than that, because I don't think he's a great shooter yet, but he is vastly improved. He improved what turnovers he made. He still made turnovers, but they became making extra passes or throwing the lob too high, as opposed to live ball turnovers and bad decisions that a coach cannot be okay with, as opposed to, oh, he tried to share the ball and this one just sailed on him. Will Hardy talked about numerous times the comfortability he has with Isaiah Collier taking risks, but Isaiah Collier needed to choose those risks accordingly. And I think Isaiah Collier got significantly better at that. Lastly, in terms of the things that I think mattered at the close of the season when the Jazz really were getting destroyed fairly frequently, if we're being frank, Kyle Filipowski entered the final few games of the season shooting very poorly. Confidence looked a tiny bit shaken despite more times. And he comes into the game against Portland. I was working stats with David on this game, and I found a stat before the game. He was 0 of 14 heading into that game from three. His last 14 shots, and in the weeks before, he was 27% from three, as opposed to 40 the 10 games prior to the 10 games there. And he seemingly was regressing back down to the mean. And then he missed two more. Confidence seemed shaken. He missed early threes. Drains one, scored 30 points, collected 18 rebounds, made numerous winning plays, leading the Jazz to an improbable win in overtime, and an excellent second half of that game, and the second half of the season, to be honest. But his offense was so good in that game. It was so good. You could see the comfortability he has with the ball in his hands, with the pressure of, hey, I have to make decisions and score, and the ability to say, you know what, our top options aren't playing today. I can step up and be that. You know, people are going to talk about, hey, he scored 30 and 18 in that game, and it's Portland. But Portland, you may not know, the second half of the season was a top 5 defense in the entire NBA. Yeah, you heard me right. Top 5 defense for a significantly longer stretch of the season than you'd probably expect. Then he followed it up against the number 1 defense in all categories, the Oklahoma City Thunder, with a 15-point and 13 rebound double-double. Filipowski finished the season beautifully in those games. Flip is slow-footed. Like, it is what it is. He's not a great defender of fours in terms of guarding in space. He's not physical enough for fives, and much is made of that because everyone has warts, and too often people focus on that rather than give the flowers where flowers are due. The dude can be an effective threat in the NBA as a front court hub, as a passer who already thrives as a passer, an offensive hub, much like Kelly Olynyk did, to give you someone he was often compared to in the NBA draft and played for the Jazz. He has more bursts to the rim and is a better rebounder than Kelly Olynyk. And I was kind of low on Filipowski, to be quite honest with you, and he changed my mind. So props to Kyle Filipowski. I'm curious to see what role he takes on the Utah Jazz, especially if the Jazz take someone in the front court, especially another guy who went to Duke named Cooper Flagg. I'm very curious to see what his role turns into. And lastly, Bryce Sensabaugh shot the cover of the ball to close the season. He shot 47% over the last 30 games of the season. 47%. His catch and shoot numbers were audacious. And though he's a poor defender, Bryce Sensabaugh might be able to stick in the league as a pure shooter. And he's really, if you look at the second half of the season, you extend that to 41 games, his numbers match up with anyone in the league as one of the best shooters in basketball. So there are some bright spots despite what was a difficult season. The Jazz had a ton of flaws this season, and we saw the season finish with a whimper. It finished unceremoniously with a record of 17-65. I'm fully aware that's not good. And it was hard for me to sit there and watch and almost root for my favorite team to lose. But the Jazz do have some youthful pieces that finished the season that excited me and the way that they finished the season. And I'm very excited to see what comes next with the Utah Jazz, both on who's back of our players on the team, but who's coming in. So that's what we're going to discuss tomorrow on Locked On Jazz, breaking down the game of Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, and the other top dogs in the NBA draft. And we'll also touch on who's available with the Wolves pick at 21. So see you then. And by the way, this is pretty fun. The Jazz may not be making the playoffs. The playoffs may be out of reach and are, but the future is bright on it's bright for the Jazz. So stay updated on the offseason news, draft coverage, and expert analysis by subscribing to the Locked On Jazz newsletter. Plus, you could win big by subscribing. Subscribe between April 7th and April 30th of 2025 for a chance to win one of these amazing prizes. A $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your sports cave, a $300 Game Time gift card, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. Get exclusive insights into Jazz thoughts, free agency, draft coverage, and team updates delivered straight to your inbox. Join the Locked On Jazz podcast for your trusted coverage every single day. So subscribe, enter today by clicking the link in the description, and read the newsletter along with listening to Locked On Jazz Daily. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow. It's always a pleasure to be back talking to my favorite people on Locked On Jazz.